Good day, friends. Welcome to Our Power is Within. I am your host, Chasmith, aka Just Chats, and I'm on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and help people to realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. Whether you have been following along this whole time or if this is your first episode, thanks for being on this journey with me. And if you do feel called to help spread the message of empowerment, healing, and possibility, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star rating if and only if I've earned it, or sharing your favorite episode with a friend. Your support helps me so much and is greatly appreciated. So we are moving along on this 5-week self-love language challenge, aren't we? What's come up for you these past few weeks as you practice these specific languages? I mentioned last week that the gift giving language is definitely the one that hasn't always come easiest for me in my past and that I've been working on. And I went big this week in my practice and I invested in myself in a really big way, which I will share with you soon enough, but we will leave it at that for now. It was definitely, let's just say, a huge step toward me beginning to show myself that I am worthy in a way that I was not previously used to doing. So this week is week 4, and we're focusing on practicing the language of touch. This is actually one of the top 2 languages, naturally coupled with quality time, which is going to be next week's practice. But they're my top 2 languages is what I'm trying to say. So touch. What does incorporating touch look like for ourselves? For starters, maybe you could set up a fun goal of hugging more often throughout the day, whether it's people, pets, or even yourself. Did you know that there are numerous benefits to extended embraces? Hugs lasting 20 to 30 plus seconds. They can seem a bit silly, but they actually fill our bodies with so much dose, especially oxytocin. And it can help reduce blood pressure and our stress levels. So just wow. I say find an extended hug buddy and get those hugs in each day. You never know. Maybe as you're doing these long embraces with a friend, you end up giggling the whole time and get the added bonus of laughter. Other options and things you can do are rolling. And when I say rolling, I literally mean like baby rolling. Think of all the ways that babies roll around on the ground during their developmental phase and then just roll like a baby. In my movement group right now, we're actually doing a 30-day 2-minute rolling challenge. Feel free to jump in and participate in that. And if you aren't in our WhatsApp group, shoot me a message to be included. It's fun times. Other things you could do is give yourself a little foot or hand massage, ask someone else to do it for you, or even do it for someone else, because even the act of giving the massage, there are touch benefits for the person giving it. So honestly, you guys, the ideas this week and the options to incorporate practicing touch as a love language are endless. I encourage you to explore the world of loving through touch and, as always, have fun with it. In today's episode, our guest is Julie O'Brien. She is now a health and life coach after recovering through her own chronic illness journey, which she will be sharing with us today. She also has a really wonderful recovery program called the Mind Body Calm Method, where she focuses on helping women overcome their chronic pain. We talk all things self-care, boundaries, and what it means to truly show care for ourselves, as well as some of her daily habits and what care and acts of love toward herself she partakes in. Julie is a wonderful spirit and an absolute joy to speak to, and I have no doubt that there's something in today's episode to inspire you or give you hope and possibility. So please enjoy this episode. All right, Julie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to talk with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this since I started following you. I don't really even remember how I found you on Instagram, but I've been following you for a while now, and I kept getting this gentle nudge to reach out and connect and invite you to the show. So I'm glad we finally made that work out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think to get started, what I want to do, I usually love to have somebody kind of give a little brief background on themselves. And I was thinking that today you could kind of share with us the catalyst that led you down the path of becoming a coach with your specific focus. Because as I was doing a little bit of research and then through following you on Instagram, I'm aware that you're a health and life coach who focuses particularly on helping women overcome chronic pain and get back to living a life of their dreams. So I'd love to kind of learn about what what led you into that career path and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, sure. I think, when we kind of look back on our past, we can kind of reflect on certain experiences that sort of lead us in this direction. And, for me, I had an experience in 2012 where I had some debilitating pelvic pain, and and even before that, I had other experiences too that were mind body in nature. But this particular experience was sort of this one of those transformational, life changing moments, like earth shattering moments. And it started in the spring of 2012. Um, I had a uterine ablation for some perimenopausal symptoms, just heavy bleeding and some polyps. And after the surgery, unfortunately, I hemorrhaged. I was left anemic, and then I got just this random vaginal infection, right? Treated with a strong antibiotic, but I was really having a hard time tolerating it. My stomach was really upset by it. So I called the office, and they just instructed me to go off of it, no big deal. But then the very next day, I remember the date, and it's coming up on an anniversary, actually. So it's June 6th, 2012. And I remember I woke to just horrendous, painful burning, and vaginal burning and vulvar burning. And I just, I didn't really panic that day. I just kind of figured it was a yeast infection, which is really common for women after they go on an antibiotic, kind of clears out their whole vaginal flora. They get a yeast infection. So no big deal. I called the office thinking, oh yeah, just, give me some medication and I'll be good to go. But it didn't work that way. So they gave me diflucan, just some medication, and it didn't help. And so then I went in again, and they gave me more medication, and it didn't help. And so I repeated that probably like 3 or 4 times. And so this was like June, middle of June, toward the end of June. And by this time, I'm starting to get anxious. I'm starting to get nervous. I'm starting to wonder what's going on. Why isn't this getting better? Doctors are getting frustrated with me. And the pain is starting to get worse. It's burning, it's shooting. I'm having some ice pick sensations. I'm having a hard time just getting through the day. At the time, I had a Pilates studio in my home, and I was having a hard time teaching clients. And I'm starting now to Google symptoms, right? And I'm starting to panic, thinking, oh my gosh, I have something that's never going to go away. And I went back in again the final time with this particular office, and they ended up doing a biopsy. And unfortunately, they misdiagnosed me with this progressive autoimmune disorder called lichen sclerosis. And I ended up going on these really strong topical steroids for months and months, and it just made everything worse. Everything just got worse. And finally, I ended up going to see a dermatologist, and I had a dermapathologist look at the original slides, and they confirmed I never had it. And so I went through that whole period of just for nothing, like all this panic. And this is a very common scenario among women that have had vulvar pain or vaginal pain. This is not an uncommon scenario, which is really frustrating. But again, I'm still trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I'm going from doctor to doctor. I'm chasing treatments. I'm having panic attacks. I had to close my Pilates business. I'm depressed, or I'm in a constant state of anxiety. And this went on for like 8 months. And then in January of 2013, after seeing, typical amount of doctors, naturopaths, acupuncturists that most people go through, I saw this physician's assistant at a local university, and she discovered I had another vaginal infection that was missed for 8 months by, I don't know, 8 to 10 doctors. And, but even after treating that with I was really treated with penicillin. I mean, that's just how basic it was. But even after successfully treating it, the neural pathways had been formed. And so I ended up, still having pain. The vaginal symptoms went away because vaginal infection went away, but I was experiencing just severe vulvar symptoms, and even rectal symptoms. And this continued. So from there, I went from going from that set of doctors to chasing more physical treatments like pelvic floor PT and techniques like Graston technique or dry needling or postural restoration, right? Anything structural to help alleviate the pain. And, none of it really worked. The only thing I can say looking back now is I think maybe my nervous system started to calm down a little bit just because of who I was seeing. Some of these practitioners were very comforting and soothing. And if anything that I got out of it, it was probably that. But I wouldn't say that the actual therapies worked for me. And then I just had this sinking feeling that I was missing something. And what was it? And so I'm still, looking. I'm not in any of the groups or, any of those groups that were triggering me, but I'm still doing some online research. And I'm glad I did, even though I think we know that the internet can be both positive and negative. But by now it's like January 2014, and that's when I came across a thread in a group, and they talked about John Sarno's books. And I went right to Amazon and I started reading the reviews, and I just knew this was what I was missing. You know how you just know? You just
Yeah. I felt the same way the minute I read it.
Yeah, I just knew this was it. And so then I found TMS Wiki and TMS Help, which was it's a lesser known website. I don't know if a lot of people know about TMS Help. And I just started reading whatever I could find. And for the first time, I think I had some of those moments where oh my gosh, I could get better. And then I started reading Lorimer Moseley. Are you familiar with him?
What's the name?
His name is Lorimer Moseley. He's an Australian pain researcher, scientist. I think he's also a PT. Brilliant. He's brilliant. And he's got an awesome TED Talk about chronic pain. And Tame the Beast is one of the websites that listeners can find that talks a little bit more about his work. He also has several books published. One is called Explain Pain. It's very technical, but he's got other things out there. But if you just Google him, he's around. He has a very sciencey background, but still incredible. And so I took, what I could from him, anything I could find on pain science. And then I started reading Howard Schubner's book, Unlearn Your Pain. But I came upon an obstacle. And in the book, there's a lot of journaling, a lot of writing exercises. And for me, I really struggled, really struggled with the journaling piece. I have a history of complex trauma, a history of anxiety, OCD. And I had been, in therapy as an adult, like on and off for 20 years about my childhood. So I felt journaling about my childhood was re-traumatizing for my nervous system. And it just created so much more anxiety for me. And so I just thought this isn't super helpful. And I knew that my nervous system was in this sort of state of dysregulation and sensitization, and creating more anxiety by journaling just wasn't working. And so journaling, and I'm talking about journaling about my childhood. I think journaling is an excellent tool for processing emotions, current feelings you're experiencing. I use it now. But for me at that point, I just thought, no, this just isn't helpful. So I just put it aside, knowing that I could always go back to it. But then I was at this point where I'm like, okay, now I need to figure out how to get better without the journaling. And it's important to remember that this was before Curable, right? This was before Journal Speak. This was before that I knew anything about somatic tracking. This was before a lot of information was out there.
Yeah, it was. So much is available to us now.
And now it's almost at a tipping point where it's too much, where I'm finding clients come to me and they say, oh, I don't know what to do. I do this and I do this. And so now we're almost in the opposite direction. But yeah, so I had to, what I did was at that point, all I could do was use my previous experiences with anxiety, my previous recoveries from panic attacks, from agoraphobia in my 20s, and OCD to help me or assist in healing from chronic pain. What I noticed, what was really important that I noticed on the TMS Wiki website, was they would refer to Claire Weeks. Have you ever heard of her?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so she is amazing. She is another Australian. She is she's been around. She's passed now, but she's a pioneer, just like John Sarno is a pioneer in the chronic pain field. Claire is a pioneer in the field of anxiety. And I was very, very familiar with her tools because I used those tools to help me recover from each time I had debilitating anxiety or my anxiety disorders. And so I started looking back at her tools and like, okay, how can I use this to help me heal from chronic pain? And so I would take her tools. I use John Sarno's tools and everything I read, researched, and Laura Moore Mosley's work, and I sort of created my own recovery program. And one of the which was really scary, to be honest, because I had no guarantee that anything I was doing was going to be of service to me. But one of the first things I noticed that I needed to change was my body was just in this constant state of bracing against the pain. I was in this state of tension all of the time, which makes sense. When you're in pain, your body naturally braces, right? And that's a natural reaction to trauma. But I knew that just from my previous experience with anxiety, that I knew in order to calm my nervous system, settle my nervous system, I needed to relax my body. And so one of the first things I started to do is intentionally, purposely relax my body, which is not an easy thing to do when your body automatically responds to every twinge that you feel with panic and tension, right?
No, it's not. Like, I remember years ago lying in a massage therapist room, and having them say, oh, try to relax, just try to relax your muscles. And this was a huge light bulb moment, because I'm like, what do you mean try to relax? I am relaxed. But that was all I knew. I didn't even know I was tense, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So
And
it's like, if you don't even, yeah. So it's like, how do you actually?
how do you actually know? Yeah. And this
Yeah.
happens a lot with clients. And what I usually tell them is to just tense their entire body up, tense all of your muscles up, clench your fists, clench everything, and then relax it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And typically that helps them helps their nervous system remember what it feels like to be relaxed. Now, this
Right.
can be really hard, especially if this has been prolonged periods of stress or trauma or chronic pain. So it takes some practice. It's not something that's done, overnight. But what I did personally was I intentionally would round my back, intentionally drop my shoulders. I noticed that because I had pelvic pain or vulvar pain, I had been my abdominals were. I mean, you think I'd have a six pack? They were so tight, and I would constantly tuck those in so much to brace. I was trying to brace, trying not to feel the pain, and so I had to let my stomach just hang out. I had to unclench my glutes, which was another area that I was bracing. And I had to let those go purposely, like consciously, right? And my inner thighs too would just notice they would clench together, and I had to let those relax. And it didn't just relieve the pain immediately, but I knew that that if I did that, it was going to help my nervous system. What I didn't realize at the time, though, that I learned much later through um, things like the polyvagal theory, and just some other research that I've done since healing, was that by doing that, I was speaking the language my nervous system understood. And, I was showing my nervous system I was safe. If you're in fight or flight, your body isn't relaxed, right? It's tight, it's tense, it's ready to run or defend yourself. And by purposely relaxing my body, I was sending the message to my nervous system that I don't need to run, I don't need to fight, I'm safe. Um, and so that was really powerful, and it was something I had to practice every single day, pretty consistently, right? Not with pressure, though, right? But just you know, um, very. I wanted to have just a very loose body. Try to be as loose as I could, really soften my body. So that was really kind of a big tool that I used in my recovery. And then the other thing I did um, was I purposely moved at a very slow pace. When you're in chronic pain and you're in fight or flight, we often move very fast. We're trying to get done with things quickly, right? And most of us, I shouldn't say all of us, but most of us, and we have difficulty slowing down. And so I purposely slowed my movements down by half, which was another message of safety to my nervous system. And, Claire Weeks talks a little bit. She doesn't talk it specifically in her book about this, but she does talk about like, how are you, how are you holding yourself? How are you holding your body? What kind of message are you sending to your nervous system through your body? And so those were two, other than, there were more things that I did. Like I repeated soothing statements to myself, really watched, kind of thought work, really watched what I was thinking. And I really tried to change my language, how I was talking about myself. And that was very helpful too. But I did it while I was doing these other things. So I feel like I was, looking back now, everything I've learned, I feel like I was using a bottom up and a top down approach. To talk about that in trauma recovery. And I feel like that's what I was using, and that's why it was successful. But it wasn't something that happened overnight. And I really worked on, the two words I use a lot is I really worked on accepting and allowing the symptoms and my feelings to just be there without reacting to them with fear or panic. or frustration, which is super hard to do, right? It's really hard for people to do that. And it was the opposite, it's the opposite of what your brain wants to do. It's the opposite of what your nervous system wants to do. It's very, and you probably agree with this, recovery is very counterintuitive. It's not something that's necessarily feels, it feels uncomfortable, right? There's some discomfort with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and it's hard to accept it, especially when you might have gotten used to worrying about if they were always going to be there in all the ways it was going to change your life and take away the things you loved. And
oh, right. There's so much grief. There's so much loss in chronic pain, and we have to grieve. I went through, I probably grieved. I thought I was grieving, through those first almost 2 years. And I was angry. I mean, I had to move through all of that anger and resentment, and and I was grieving my former life, and I would literally have these adult temper tantrums, on my bed, like kicking and screaming like a child. But I needed to do that. I had to go through all of that for me to come to this point of acceptance and surrender, right? I heard you've talked about that word before on your podcasts. And then I started to actively do things my nervous system found soothing. I love the podcast you did on being creative, and creativity. I painted while I was recovering. I needed to do something. I'm not a painter. I would consider myself to be kind of creative, but not, a massive talent, right? So but I needed to do something. I wasn't working. The kids were at school during the day, and I couldn't just sit around listening to my thoughts. So I needed to do something that calmed my nervous system, and I started painting, of all things, wine glasses. And I saw some in a boutique, and I was like, oh, that looks like fun. And so I just bought some cheap wine glasses at the dollar store, and I started painting wine glasses. And of all things, on the wine glasses, I was painting the Real Housewives of like Woodbury. That's like some of the cities in my state. And ironically enough, I ended up having a business out of that for a short period of time, because my cousin owned a boutique and she started selling them in her boutique. And so it was kind of a funny story. I don't do that anymore. But I know. It was like one of these things that just sort of fell in your lap. But what I noticed with painting was the brush strokes were just very soothing for me, right? And the other thing that was really helpful while I was doing that was it helped me work through certain things I feared. Like I had this fear of sitting. Sitting was really hard, difficult for me because of the vulvar symptoms. And so it became something I was afraid to do. And I would go into a complete panic attack anytime I had to sit. I remember going to my kids' like choir concerts, and they have those, folding metal chairs. Just looking at them would send my nervous system into a panic. But so when I was painting, though, I was able to sit and work on some graded exposure while I was doing something. And I wasn't trying to, it wasn't a distraction in terms of like I was trying to avoid what I was feeling. I was working on sort of allowing symptoms to be there, softening my body while I was doing something soothing for my nervous system. And that was really helpful for me. Other things like I noticed that I really enjoyed like just browsing in stores, so like window shopping. Like I had a very leisurely pace, right? It gave me a little bit something else to focus on. I was around people, but I didn't feel like I had to, I didn't have the pressure of having to have conversations if I didn't want to, or anything like that. But just being in the vicinity of other people was really helpful for me. It made me feel, kind of normal, quote, little air quotes around that. So that was helpful. We had a cheap pool in our backyard, not a fancy pool. And then I would just float. I would take the time to do that. And, And so I just did a post recently on Instagram where like, if you were to look at my life while I was recovering, it looked like, oh, it's just, super easy and relaxing. But we know as we're recovering, all of these things are really hard to do, right? Because we have pain while we're doing them. And it's about allowing the symptoms to exist, allowing our feelings to surface, those symptoms to exist while we're doing all of those things. And I just kept practicing that. That's just I call it a practice, because the word practice was really important. Claire Weeks talks about that in her book. And the reason why I love it so much is it's not a test. And so when you're practicing, there's no pressure involved, right? We're just practicing it. I got up every day and I'm like, I'm just going to practice. That's all I can do. I can't do any more than that. And that was really helpful for my nervous system. It gave it choice. There wasn't so much pressure involved. And then from there, I just really started to challenge myself more, with exercise and, other things I did. I started lifting weights and doing some of those things. But it was a progression. It wasn't, because I think whenever we hear these recovery stories, we think, oh, we make it sound like it's easy, but it wasn't. It was, there was discomfort, but it was the kind of discomfort that got me where I wanted to be, which was pain-free.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I have a question. So, so you're doing all these things to kind of soothe and calm the nervous system. So you're learning how to practice moving more slowly in anything you're doing. Mm-hmm. You're floating in a pool. You're focusing on brush strokes and just soothingly painting, things like this. Did you find that just kind of became your MO, and that even after recovery, you kind of still implemented or integrated that slower lifestyle into your life? Or did you find that because your nervous system was calm, that you were able to reintegrate a faster paced lifestyle again?
Great question. Such a good question. I would say that I exaggerated it while I was recovering. It was in a very exaggerated way. And then it was really organic as I started getting more and more pain-free moments, more and more confidence. I was able to pick up the pace a little bit more. But I will say that what I learned from that was my nervous system really requires a more peaceful life. That's what I really learned. And prior to that, I never took a break. I mean, I was one of those people that was doing all the things, right? And didn't have great boundaries. And I'm still working on the boundary piece. And I never slowed down. So that was one of the big lessons of this experience, was my nervous system requires me to have more peaceful moments in my life. That's how it stays healthy. But I mean, I have a business and I'm doing things, I have 2 grown kids and a family. And while I like to have more quiet moments, I don't have to move at that exaggerated slow pace as I once did. But I will say that since building the business, and we're exposed to stress all the time, and I have a human brain, mind body symptoms have popped up, and it's sort of this clue for me to say, Julie, you need to slow down. It's a barometer for where my nervous system is, and am I taking good care of myself? And then I need to kind of pull back. Does that help answer the question?
100%. Yeah. Cause and I completely can relate to that. And it's interesting because I think you go through like the really hard, maybe you end up, because you don't know all these things, so you end up really sick or really in pain. And the nice thing is through this journey, we get these tools and this awareness. And so, like you said, your body now, mind body syndrome, I don't know that we're ever cured of mind body syndrome potential. It's just that we're more our relationship with it is better, because when something shows up, we're more aware almost immediately. And we now know that that's a cue to make some adjustments.
Yeah. And
Where
we have
before maybe we
tools.
just didn't know, we didn't have the
Right.
tools, and we
Yeah.
didn't know. And then the body had to get louder and louder and louder. So,
Yeah. And to me, it's just like my experiences with anxiety, right? Anxiety still pops up for me at times. And it's usually in relation to circumstances. And then it's my clue for, I have tools that I can use to help calm my nervous system. And to me, this is exactly the same thing. Yeah, we're not immune to, especially even, you know, chronic pain recovery coaches or practitioners. We're not immune. We have a human brain. So, um, but we have tools, right? And we can use these experiences, these little nudges, or sometimes they're very loud nudges from our nervous system, our body, and listen to those and say, okay, what am I doing? What do I need to do? What do I need to do to scale back?
mhm.
I know for myself, even Instagram can be very triggering for me. So I have to watch how much I'm on it. I don't post as often as a lot of other people, but that's because my nervous system can only tolerate so much. And I have to work
Yeah,
within that tolerance.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it comes down to like that boundary setting that you were talking about, and just leveraging your own energy. I very much relate. I feel like when I first started the podcast Instagram page, I felt like everyone was telling me how much I should be posting, should, that magical word should,
Yes.
and how much you should be doing. And it's like, I'm not going to do that. It's inorganic. It's not authentic. Like, it's going to all
Mm-hmm.
just happen as it's supposed to.
Right.
And yeah, not to stress yourself out or put pressure to have to show up in a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, kind of getting back to your original question. So, after during the recovery piece, I remember, or during the pain, not even the recovery, during the pain, there was one moment I remember, and I'll just never forget it. And I was in such suffering, like, and it got really dark. I remember right before I went to the University of Minnesota, there was a lot of dark thoughts that were going through my head. And I just remember at one point, it was sort of a plead to God or to myself, right? And just said, if if you help me, recover or get through this, I'm going to help other women do the same. And that's kind of where it was born. It really was. It sounds very dramatic, but it was in a moment of deep, deep suffering, and I really firmly believe that I needed to go. It sounds crazy, and a lot of people don't like to hear this, but for me, this was the catalyst, right? Um, for change, and the catalyst for doing this work and working with women. And I honestly, if a lot of people, would you go back? People ask, would you ever change anything? And I wouldn't, um, because I learned so much about myself through that experience, and so much empowerment was born from it. And so I wouldn't. I would probably go through it again.
That's awesome. Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. And I know sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to connect with that. It's like, if
Mm-hmm.
there's anyone listening who's like where you were in those darkest days, it's like, no, I don't understand. How can there be a gift in this? How could I want to do this again? But yeah, you get to the other side and it starts to make sense.
Yeah, you're right. It does. Yeah.
So, you mentioned that you had a Pilates studio. Did you ever go back to teaching Pilates again, or did
Oh,
that go to the wayside?
yeah. I did for a short time, and it just didn't feel, it no longer resonated with me. And I have a reformer in my basement, and I still will do it myself, but just working with clients in that way it didn't feel right anymore. So I did it for a little while, and then I decided to move on. And from there, I went through a health coaching certification, and I thought I was going to do some of that. And I kind of dabbled with some health coaching, and that it was a great experience, but it didn't really fit. And I think I was, even though I was like, oh, I was a little resistant, and I needed some time, resistant to kind of starting to work with chronic pain. And I think it's because my nervous system just needed time. It was too soon. I needed more time, um, space between recovery and then starting this work before I could actually really be of service to other women. And so I did a little bit of health coaching. I went through a life coaching certification through the life coach school, and which was great. They're great. They do a lot of cognitive based therapy, it's very cognitive based. And so that piece of it's wonderful. But then since then I've started working with clients, and then I went through Howard Shrubner's program last summer. And then I started researching and reading about the polyvagal theory, which has been really, really wonderful. And I know you had Sarah on your podcast, Sarah B. Coaching, Sarah Baldwin, and she's unbelievable. Her Instagram is great. And so I'm really learning about the polyvagal theory and how that can be helpful for people recovering. And yeah, so I've been working specifically on that. I have a program. It's a 3-month program that I offer clients and women. And it's been really fun. It's been such a blessing to meet so many women, so many really brave and courageous women, and their determination to get better.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long have you been teaching this program?
So I've been doing this program. It's probably been almost 2 years now.
And you do it like a few times a year?
No, the approach is evergreen model. So it's not a group program or a launch or anything. I work one-on-one with women, and so they can apply at any time. The program is hosted on Thinkific, which is a teaching app, just like Teachable. I'm sure you've heard of those. And then I work with them, weekly through one-on-one supported sessions.
Okay. How did you go about creating the program?
Oh, such a good question. Well, of course, I drew on my own experience, which was really helpful. I would say going through the health coach certification program, which is HCI, Health Coach Institute. That was really helpful in creating the modules and things like that, having sort of that back end experience. And then moving through the Life Coach School program was also helpful in teaching the coaching aspect of it. So both of those together really helped me create, kind of put this whole program together, kind of using that. And then my own personal experience in terms of what to actually put into it. And, so there's it's a very comprehensive program. So it starts out, kind of with just brain basics and pain science and things like that, just to make sure that, clients and I are on the same page, even though many of the clients I come to have already had so much knowledge. We still just review that. And then the modules really build on each other from there.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool because it can be, it's cool that you had those certifications for the health coach and life coach, because we all have the experience of going through the healing journey, and we have all these great tools and all this information, but sometimes lack the awareness, knowledge, or, training of like, I have all these tools and this experience, but how do I actually put it together in a way that makes sense for somebody else to like integrate?
Yes, and apply it. Yeah, it's so true. And the coaching world is wonderful in the sense that it's unregulated and anyone can coach, but it can also be challenging because of that. So, I thought it was really important for me to have these certifications. I wouldn't have been able to coach without them, just, my confidence level. just from that perspective. And it's been wonderfully helpful. And then the great thing about it is then you're able to take what you know and put it, kind of bring those together. And that was really helpful to help me create it. And I'm pretty comfortable creating programs now. So, but in the future, I'd really love to do some group coaching and maybe even just a standalone digital product too as well, just to make it more affordable for people.
Right. Yeah. Because not everyone can afford that private training
Yes.
and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I know you focus on women. Do you focus on women with any mind body syndrome symptoms, or specifically the ones that you went through?
I don't have a specific niche for mind body syndromes. I work with women that come to me with all different kinds of chronic symptoms, whether that's chronic fatigue, or it's some anxiety symptoms, which are still, mind body symptoms, right? To I have several clients that have IC symptoms or pelvic symptoms. So it's just a wide variety of people that come.
Gotcha. Cool. How did you come up with the name Mind Body Calm Method?
Oh gosh. No, that's a really good question. I don't know. I guess I kept the calm piece was really important because that's exactly what I did and we need to do when we're healing from anxiety or chronic pain is we need to calm our nervous system, right? That's what the nervous system is asking for. It needs to be soothed. It needs to know that it's safe. And so I think that's important. I think mind body just sounded, those are the two areas we need to really focus on, is the mind and the body. And they're not separate, they're together, right? And so I think that's kind of how I came up with it.
Awesome. So do you feel like Julie 20 years ago would have ever known this is what she'd be doing today if somebody came down and told you, hey, you're going to be a mind body coach someday with your own program?
Oh my God, no. I mean, it's so crazy. I never, ever in a million years would have thought that this is something I'd be doing ever. But so grateful, right? It's such a rewarding, it's just such a rewarding career. And knowing that you can support other women and knowing how it feels to go through that and how isolating it is. And just being able to be a part of their path out. But never in a million years would I have thought this is what I'd be doing today.
Yeah. I mean, you were teaching Pilates, which is kind of like a coaching, it's a coaching role.
Yeah. And
so
it's mind body. There's a lot of mind body in Pilates. Yep.
And did you always know you wanted to be a coach in some capacity and just not necessarily chronic pain coach? Or did you really kind of have a shift where it wasn't even where you ever thought about life coaching or coaching in that capacity?
Well, my background is teaching, so early childhood. So that's kind of where this is all born from. So I kind of knew I've always been a teacher, and I've always liked the helping profession. And so I worked with kids for years and years and years, and so out of that, once I had my own kids, I was like, okay, I'm sort of done. I don't know if I can be around anyone else's guy of my own. And then I started doing Pilates. So I think I've always kind of gravitated toward that profession of teaching, coaching, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of innate. And I think that's kind of where all of this, kind of stems from. But that helping profession, I consider myself to be empathetic and, have some of those qualities. And I think a lot of us that are like that move into those helping professions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's it's almost like you were destined to teach, coach, kind of have a role like that. And then the universe gave you this beautiful gift that was wrapped in a very complicated experience to kind of help guide you into discovering, what was going to be the direction that you headed for coaching in a different capacity.
Yeah, I love how you said that. I just love how you said that. That's exactly it.
That's awesome. What would you say, or what advice would you give for anybody who might be listening, who is in the shoes that you were once in, but who can't afford private coaching, or maybe can't even afford some of these group coaching packages out there? Where would you tell them to start?
Good. Let me see. And I'm going to kind of look back on my own experience. I think what was really helpful for me, because I didn't do any coaching, I didn't go through any, I didn't work with anyone one-on-one, or in a group. I started filling my brain with, and now this can be triggering for some people. So if it is triggering for you, just put it off to the side. But I would fill my brain with success stories. That was one of the things I did. I needed to build my belief that I could get better. And it didn't matter. I kind of let go of where I had pain, because I think that can be a real obstacle for people. They can get really caught up where they have the symptoms, and especially for vulvar symptoms, because they're not symptoms that you can easily talk to your neighbor about, right?
Right.
So I needed to let go of that. And I really just focused on, like, if all of these other people are recovering from these really debilitating pain symptoms, I am no different. And so I really used that to start building my belief, like filling my brain with that, filling my brain with knowledge of pain science, right? And then some of it is because there's enough information. And truly, if someone's motivated, there's enough information now that somebody, if they're motivated enough and they can do it, they can go without one-on-one or group, right? Some people can't, and that's okay too. But then I just started applying these techniques. The ones I describe are other ones, like somatic tracking is another great one. And I committed to this practice of doing it every day, even when your brain doubts it, because your brain is going to doubt the whole process. That's what it's hardwired to do. It's negatively biased, right? So even though that's going to happen, those doubts are going to come up, I just continued to fill my brain with success stories. I continued to practice and really having that outcome independence, which I didn't even know was a term back then. I just focused on giving my nervous system the amount of time it needed to heal. And I knew that if I looked at the clock or the calendar, it was creating more anxiety. And that was the opposite of what I was trying to achieve. I was trying to soothe my nervous system. And so I just kept practicing that. And I didn't have any guarantees. There were no guarantees at all, right, that I was going to get better. The other thing I'll say is I really made a point of looking for inconsistencies and really challenging some of these beliefs that were going through my brain, right? Like certain things would pop up. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. There was something really sinister going on in my body. That wouldn't be happening, right? And really noticing those. The other thing I think is important too, that I find now kind of working with clients, is our brain has a tendency to deny any evidence we're getting better, right?
Yeah.
When we're thinking constantly, like, worried and anxious about getting better, our brain will deny any evidence of or proof that maybe we are on the right path. And I really made a point of questioning things and believing into these moments where I had less pain. That doesn't make any sense, that I would have less pain here. Yes, that proves that I can get better. Oh, I'm having a decrease in symptoms. Yes, I'm on the right path. And, I encourage my clients to write those down, right? Like a healing evidence sheet. writing those moments down. And I would do that. And I would just keep showing my brain every time my brain would be like, nah, I don't think this is working. No, I'm on the right path. And so for people out there that are not able to work with somebody else right now, I really speaking to them, I want you to know that you can do this. I did it. You can do that. And commit to practicing, not in a pressured way, though. We're not going to pressure ourselves when we practice, right? That's the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. But commit to calming your nervous system. Commit to filling your brain with success stories, people that have gotten better. And be really good to yourself. Be massively compassionate, because that was the other thing I needed to do that I wasn't doing. I had to take a crash course in self-compassion and, give myself what had been absent for years, before the pain, right? Years and years. And, and just, keep practicing in a very, calm, slow, gentle way.
I like that. I like that you use the word practice. That's such a great way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a practice. Yeah,
it's less. There's no pressure with practicing something.
Yeah, practice for progress. They say practice for perfection, but no, there's no such thing as that. But progress, right? If we're just practicing, we're not testing. This isn't a pass or fail exam. It's just we're going to get up, and all we can do today is I'm just going to practice today. It's not going to be perfect, no. And there were many days where I would end up in my bed just sobbing, right? And then I also would have to take breaks, because recovery is very conscious, whether you're somatic tracking or you're journaling or you're accepting and allowing sensations, which is really very similar to indifference, right? But those are all very conscious, and the brain doesn't like to have to do extra work. So it's important to really take breaks. And for me, my breaks were taking a nap, when I could. Now I had 2 little kids at the time, so I would, kind of work around that. And if that meant that they were watching a TV show for like an hour and a half, fine, because it was really important for me, in my nervous system. And it was the first time ever I was making myself a priority.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because you explained this so well. And I know I've personally gone through this and still do go through it. I love that you highlighted that recovery is so conscious. And yeah, it's that constant consciousness that we're trying to bring to the surface so that we can be aware and make these shifts and shift the neural pathways and shift the patterns. It is work. It is work. And it can be so exhausting. It's like the brain working overtime. Like, we're just trying to consciously have it work in a way that supports our healing. But yeah, it can be very exhausting sometimes. And I love that you mentioned this, and then saying take breaks. So important. I know for me, I think I was talking to someone else too once about this. There became a point where, especially once you're integrating back into life too, where you're also using all your, energy and your capacity and your brain in all these other ways, where sometimes certain tools would be too much. Like, I would be like, I just don't have it in me to do that tool today, but I could totally lay here right now and let a meditation guide me, and honoring that ties hand in hand with the point you made about not doing things with pressure. So rather than pressuring myself to have to do that thing, even though I don't have the mental stamina for it, and just rather allowing me to say, oh, what can I handle right now? And like you said, maybe sometimes that is just closing your eyes and resting and taking a nap.
Yeah, exactly. And that's still healing, right? It's still healing, because you're not doing it with the pressure, right? The pressure wouldn't be helpful for the nervous system. And we have a window of tolerance. Our nervous system has a window of tolerance, and we need to work within that window. Otherwise, we're just stressing the nervous system. And in the beginning, our window of tolerance is probably very small. I know mine was in the very, very beginning. And then it starts to widen as we start to stretch it a little bit, right? And it's that window of tolerance gets wider and wider. And so it's working within that is important, but not to the point of, of re-traumatization or, an increase in symptoms. And I think there's a lot of people kind of, and I don't know how much of this is happening now, but I remember when I was reading in the beginning years ago, that just get back into life, do all the things. And for some people this really works, but for a lot of people, their nervous system isn't ready to tolerate jumping back into life and doing all the things immediately, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be a slower progression. And that was the case for me. And that's okay, right?
Yeah. It's like accepting that, knowing nothing's wrong with you. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is.
Yeah, it just is.
So, speaking of nervous systems and calming our nervous system, early on you did mention that you had experienced a lot of childhood trauma and that the thought of journaling was really triggering to you. Did you find that once your nervous system was regulated and in a calmer state of being naturally, did you find you were able to go back and address that trauma, or did you actually find that you didn't need to?
I didn't need to personally. And, what I've learned about trauma is it's not necessarily the experience of trauma that we need to revisit, but it's our reaction to it, right? It's our nervous system's reaction to the trauma. And so, knowing that was really helpful for me because, I had gone through so many years of therapy revisiting that trauma. I mean, I was in therapy for 20 years because of childhood events. And so for me personally, I didn't feel like I needed to go back. But I mean, because of that experience, it's complex trauma. It shows up at times in my life. Of course it does. And I'm still learning about myself especially with Instagram's really a unique place because it's very trauma and there's a lot of very trauma informed practitioners on there. So it's been really helpful for me, that aspect of it. But I also know that it's okay if I'm not going back and trying to relive, or bring that back up. I don't, at least right now. And I haven't had an increase of that pain since. For me, I haven't had to.
Awesome.
But some
That's
people
great.
might need to, and that's okay too.
Yeah,
That's okay too.
absolutely. Well, and you also did, like you said, you kind of already had a lot of therapy and revisited it. And some people might get into this path or journey without any of that, with
Right.
never visiting it, and they might need to explore it or not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What has been one of the biggest lessons that you've learned through all of this?
Oh, the biggest lesson was taking care of myself. It sounds really simple, but I don't think I was very good at taking care of myself. I was very good at taking care of everyone else, really good, like exceptional at taking care of everyone else, but not so good at taking care of myself. And so that was the biggest lesson. And I'm going to be honest, that's something I still need to work on because those patterns have been born of taking care of other people since I was probably 10 or 11. And it's very ingrained. And so
Yeah.
that's still something I need, especially in a helping profession, right? I still need to make sure that I'm taking and check in with myself and take good care of myself. And so that was probably one of the biggest, and involved in that was boundaries too, right? All of that sort of is involved in taking better care of myself, making sure that I'm, getting my needs met, and saying no to things that don't feel good to me, right?
So important.
Mm-hmm.
So important.
And hard to do. Like boundary work is probably one of the hardest things people do besides healing from chronic pain. It's really
Absolutely,
hard.
especially if you're not used to it. I mean, I can literally think of how often still, yeah, practicing it right, but still then I know I have to set a boundary and the nervous system instantly goes into like protection mode of
Mm-hmm.
all the fears that show up around setting said boundary. But the crazy thing is once you set it and actually just say the words and say what needs to be said, it's like you can almost just take the deepest breath and it's almost instantly refreshing. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that because if you're not used to it your whole entire life and then
Mm-hmm.
now you're going to make yourself, have boundaries, it's like the
Yeah.
act of setting one is so terrifying. It can feel
Yeah.
so
Yeah. It's all
terrifying.
that anticipatory
Hmm.
anxiety and that fear of
Yeah.
disappointing other people and what are they going to think? And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and boundary work can be very uncomfortable. It's not, it's not easy, but once you start doing it's one of those things. It's unfamiliar to your brain, and anything that's new to your brain, I always say, anything new that we do, the brain's going to complain. It just is because it's unfamiliar.
Yeah. Yeah, but we just keep giving it evidence, and
Exactly.
it's like a graded exposure and it starts to
It
learn.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just think of all the graded exposures that we do.
Hmm.
We do a lot of them.
Hmm. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. So do you have an overarching message that you feel compelled to share with the world, like in your
Oh my
work, in your life?
goodness. An overarching message. Oh, let me think about that. Um, if I could speak to um, women, and it kind of just goes along with what we were just talking about, taking care of yourself. I think, we kind of move through life being caretakers. And again, I don't want to generalize most women, not all women. And, I think that these things that pop up, these mind body symptoms, are it's our nervous system, our body asking us to slow down, asking us to take better care of ourselves, asking us to listen, right, and to show up for us. And if other women are going through this, is to really be good to yourself. And I know there's a lot that we talked about today, but it's important to show up for you and honor yourself, especially for those women that are often taking care of others and
Hmm.
neglecting themselves. Because I think the women that I work with, I would say the majority are doing that. And they've done that their whole life.
Definitely. So aside from setting boundaries, what does taking care of yourself mean for you?
Oh, well, things that I still do for myself. I still love to take naps. So that's always been something that I love to do. That's taking care of myself. There's little things like little regulating activities or calming activities. That's one. Um, Exercise. I bought a Bellicon, a ridiculously expensive Bellicon rebounder, a trampoline, and I love it. It's kind of like, because remember when you're a kid and you're jumping on a trampoline and how much fun that was, right?
Yeah.
You get a little bit of that back. And so for my inner child, I feel like that's really, really been nice. Plus, it's a really good workout. And for people that maybe have movement or joint pain or anything like that, it can be very easy on your joints. And you don't have to jump very high, right? So movement is really helpful for me. We've been doing a lot of walking and hiking on the weekends, being out in nature, but not just being out in nature, but really making an effort to be present while I'm there, like listening for birds purposely, right? Looking at the trees. Like this spring, I made a point when I went out and walked. that I would watch the trees budding, because how many times have I missed that, right? Like all of a sudden it's spring and then summer and there's leaves everywhere. And I totally didn't pay any attention to, the budding leaves or anything like that, but really making a point of being present. And it's not all the time, obviously, but those types of things. As a family, well, that we do those walks as a family, but little things. This might seem really insignificant, but if I don't have to make dinner, Chaz, I'm telling you, it's a good day. Like just, those tiny little, they're like these micro moments of just through the polyvagal lens, they call them glimmers. And that's a glimmer for my nervous system. It's the sort of this micro moment of feeling safe, connected, loved. Right. And so something like that, spending time with friends, really shutting business down for me is important, because I noticed that I could be one of those people that could be working all of the time. And so purposefully taking breaks from work is important as well.
Nice. That's awesome.
Huh.
So what else are you up to in the world these days?
Well, besides working with clients, I just joined a EFT certification program, which I'm really excited about. That's emotional freedom technique, or tapping, if you're not familiar. Just at the beginning stages. And so I'm doing it through EFT Universe, which is a scientifically backed clinical EFT, which I'm excited about. And so I just started that maybe it was the beginning of this month, of May. Yes. And so really excited about that. It takes about a year to move through that certification, but tapping for me has been like one of the few things that can immediately calm my nervous system. Just tapping on these meridian points can calm me quickly. And so I think it would be a wonderful self-regulating technique for clients. Not only that, but it can serve as a really beautiful way to move through past trauma. So I'm kind of geeked out about tapping these days.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So where can people connect with you?
Right now I am currently on Instagram. So that's kind of my main social media. And you can find me at Julie O'Brien Coaching on there. I have a website, and that is julieo'briencoaching.com. And you can also connect me through my email list. It's called the Mind Body Calm Memo. You can find that if you go to my website, or you go to my bio on my Instagram handle and click the link. It'll take you to Rewire and Recover. It's a guidebook that I've created, and if you click on that, you can join there as well and receive the guidebook.
Cool. You also have, I wanted to point out for anyone listening, if they check out your website, you also have an awesome blog, and I know you haven't written in it in a while.
I know, I need to get back to that.
It's still a great resource.
Oh, thank you.
It's still a great resource. There's lots of great posts for people to sift through and read. I thought there were some really great posts in there. So I was like, she's a good writer.
Yeah, I need to, when you're writing on Instagram and then you're writing the newsletter and then something falls off to the side always.
Because we, as much as we want to all be super women, we're not, we can't do it all. We can't be in all places at all times and do all the things.
Right.
There's a season for everything. And I think there's a lot of really great content already on there. So
I appreciate that. But thank you for the reminder. That is something that I would like to get back to as well.
Yes. Is there anything that that I didn't get to ask you that you would like to share with anyone who's listening?
Gosh, I don't think so. I feel like we covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Don't you?
It was good.
Yeah. I just love talking to you, and I love the work that you're doing, and I just want you to know it's appreciated in this world. And thank you for your podcast. Thank you for this opportunity as well. And you're just really easy to talk to. So I appreciate that as well.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the compliments, and it always helps, sometimes just like any other human with a brain, I have doubts and question what I'm doing and myself and, what's it all for? And yeah, so it's just good reminders like, hey, you're okay.
Chaz, you asked great questions, and I'm just really excited to live through your experience now that you're by the beach.
Thanks, me too. Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you once again for your time and for sharing your wisdom with anyone who's listening. And hopefully they will learn something today. And then, some people might feel really connected to you and called to reach out to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That is a wrap. Thanks for being here as always. And if Julie's message resonated with you, you can find links in the show notes to all the ways to connect with her. And speaking of self-care, do not forget to explore the love language of touch for yourself this week. And until next time, make this week great.